Hey, why don't you marry me? I'm better suited for you than that plain Emily, right? As she said this, my sister draped her arm over my husband's shoulder and sidled up to him. Watching this, all of the restraint I had held on to until now crumbled. I felt the tightly wound thread within me snap.
Stop messing around. You've always been like this.
I shouted this and lunged at my sister. Just at that moment, she toppled over ungracefully, still in that awkward position. My sister opened her eyes wide. A moment of silence fell. This is the story of a certain ending that my atrocious sister and I reached. My name is Emily, 27 years old. After graduating from the literature department of a state university, I've been working as a librarian in a public library. During my lunch break, when I checked my smartphone, there was a message from my sister, Michelle, who is a year older than me. I'm going to use your blue sandals. They still look like new, but that's fine, right? I let out a sigh. My sister has always been like this, since we were kids. It seems that whenever I had something, she perceived it as better than hers. She quickly covets it, gets bored, and then dumps it back onto me. My sister, even from a family member's perspective, is beautiful. I remember when we were kids, she was adored by adults and often compared to a French doll. She went to a famous private university on recommendation and apparently even won a beauty pageant there. Now she's leveraging her beauty and working as a receptionist at a well-known company. She's living a life straight out of a fairy tale. In contrast, I'm truly plain. I have a very typical American face, and people often tell me, Emily, you're like a traditional doll. Maybe it's because of my sister's constant bullying, but I'm often told that I'm very shy and introverted. Since childhood, while my sister was playing with dolls, I was the kind of kid who would sit alone and quietly read a book. But that's fine with me. I want to live a life surrounded by books. I've studied hard with that sole intention, and now I'm working as a librarian, a job that I've always dreamed of. Processing checkouts with barcodes, finding books that facility users are searching for. While working at the library, I always remember something that's from my high school days. I attended the same high school as my sister, and I was exhausted from remarks and stares like, "Oh, is this what Michelle's sister is like?" My only joy was writing book reviews of my favorite books as part of the library committee activities. Most regular high school students who are busy with clubs and romance would not pay attention to such things, but I've kept writing, hoping that they would understand the charm of my favorite books, even though I knew that no one would read them. However, there was just one person who would enthusiastically read my reviews. This male student would borrow the books that I reviewed, one after another. I felt a sense of validation, which made me happy. He was a year ahead of me in school, and our relationship was nothing more than that of a student and a librarian. Due to my introverted personality, we had never spoken, except for the borrowing procedures. Despite this, I had always remembered his name on the library card. I wondered how he was doing now. Does he still like reading books? Occasionally, I thought about him, the person who made me continue to love books. Then one day, a marriage proposal came in for my older sister. At 28, my sister Michelle was of marriageable age, so it was only natural for such talks to come up. "What? A blind date with this guy?" Michelle exaggeratedly threw the blind date photos and the man's profile on the table. The loud sound startled me as I was eating. "Well, what kind of person was he?" my mother asked. "He's just this chubby and nerdy-looking guy, and he's currently a temp. Why do I have to go on a blind date with such a guy?" "Well, if you don't like him, just reject him." Without thinking, I said that.
But he's related to some executive at our client's company. I can't just reject him.
It's terrible. Michelle made a troubled face, then suddenly her expression brightened. Oh, I know. Emily, you should go on the blind date. I was shocked at her suggestion. Seeing my wide-eyed surprise, Michelle hurriedly explained. You're a respectable nerd yourself, right? You might hit it off with him. No matter how I look at it, he's not my type. But he might be perfect for you, since you're not exactly a looker. So could you please take my place this weekend? What are you talking about? I don't want to do it either. And it would be rude to the other party. And how should I explain me going in your place? It'll work out as long as you go on the date. But don't you dare tarnish my reputation. Michelle forcefully shoved the open blind date photo and profile in my direction. Looking at them, I let out a surprised sound. What? Do you have a problem? No, not at all. Thanks, Michelle. I'll accept this match. Huh? You actually like that chubby nerd? Well, I'll give him to you. I look forward to the birth of the nerdy couple. Ignoring Michelle's teasing voice, I continued to gaze at the blind date photo and the man's profile. Then, on the day of the blind date, I first apologized for Michelle's rudeness to the man on the other side, and then conveyed my wish to have a blind date with him instead. The man sitting across from me was indeed chubby, and had a nerdy aura about him, but he still looks like he used to. Yes, the man on this blind date was none other than the man who used to borrow books after reading my reviews. He, too, looked at me straight on and let out a small, were you by any chance the librarian out of high school? Yes, I was. I remembered you as well. From there, we hit it off, talking about our high school days and books, and thus began my relationship with him. Thomas was the same school year as Michelle, but she didn't seem to remember him at all. During one of our dates, Thomas said this to me. Honestly, Emily, if Michelle had shown up, I would have turned her down. Her personality is quite infamous, after all. Well, given who I am, I guess Michelle would have probably rejected me first. I'm truly sorry about what happened with my sister back then, but I was really happy to see you again, Thomas. Plus, I think you're wonderful. If you're worried about your appearance, why don't we try to lose some weight together? You're right. I've become so immersed in my work that I've stopped exercising and caring about my appearance. I'll try harder so that you won't dislike me. I'm glad to hear that, but I would never dislike you just because of your appearance. We had such conversations and our dates went smoothly. Eventually, I received a proposal from Thomas and we decided to get married. My sister, who said, I've seen the fat guy's face before, didn't attend, but at the meeting of our families, everyone blessed us in a warm atmosphere. Afterward, we found a new home and decided to start our life together. And then, on the day of our wedding, having a wedding in a church in this day and age is just like plain old Emily. That dress suits you, just like a real American doll. As usual, my sister ridiculed me. Can you stop with those remarks for today? We're about to meet the family. Feeling miserable for being insulted by my sister, even in my wedding dress, Thomas and his family arrived. Good morning. We look forward to today. When Thomas, dressed in his traditional suit, appeared, my sister let out a small, "What?"
And for good reason. Thomas had worked hard to transform his appearance with me, and he had become strikingly handsome. Before the ceremony began, my sister whispered in my ear,
"What the heck? He looks nothing like the photo from before."
Thomas worked hard. He already had a beautiful face. He just looked dull in that photo because he was overweight and had a bad haircut. I thought he had had plastic surgery. It's great that a porcelain doll like you could marry a man who looks like a movie star. Despite enduring my sister's sarcasm, we managed to get through the wedding ceremony. We had a small reception at the church, with only those who were important to us. As we were about to leave, with the happiness of being blessed. It happened. "Hello there, Thomas. Thank you for marrying my ugly little sister." My drunk sister came up to us and said this.
"Well, Emily isn't ugly at all. Thank you for today."
"Shouldn't you head home, sister?" Ignoring my words, my sister continued. "So, Thomas, you've changed your appearance, but what about your job? I heard you were a temp, right?"
"Yes, I am currently working as a temp."
"Oh, I couldn't stand having a husband who's a temp. I'm currently dating a startup CEO. I might get married soon."
"Oh, congratulations."
"Hey, sister, Thomas restrained me from responding with his hand and gave a small shake of his head.
"Thank you for coming today, sister. Please be careful on your way home."
My sister, who was told this by Thomas, left after saying, "Be very happy." "Thomas, I'm really sorry about my sister."
"It's all right. People like her won't change, no matter what you say. But Emily, you've had a tough time. Let's strive for happiness from now on."
"Thomas, thank you." And thus my married life with Thomas began. In fact, Thomas was working as a temp while trying to make it as a novelist. He had fallen in love with reading after he read some book reviews I wrote in high school, and it inspired him to start writing himself. He's only had a few pieces published in literary magazines so far, but I know that's still an impressive achievement. He's been getting paid for his manuscripts, but he admitted there was still some financial uncertainty, which is why he was balancing his job as a temp with his writing. "Thomas, I have a job too, and we have some savings. Why don't you focus solely on your writing?"
"Emily, you're always so supportive. Thank you. I'll do my best."
So Thomas quit his job and dedicated himself to writing. Life wasn't easy, but I loved watching Thomas passionately dive into his manuscripts, and that kept us going. Then one day, we got a call from my sister, Michelle. She was engaged to the startup CEO she had mentioned. "So next week, he's coming over to meet the family before we get married. You should come too. I really don't want to introduce him to you and your jobless husband, but it would be odd if you weren't there. Make sure you dress appropriately." Despite my annoyance at Michelle's attitude, I knew we had to attend her engagement and wedding. With that in mind, Thomas and I decided to attend the family meeting. "I'm sorry you have to miss your important event that day, Thomas."
"It's okay, Emily. She's your sister after all."
When we arrived at the meeting place, Michelle, wearing a smug expression, was there. "Welcome, the antisocial couple. Be nice to my darling, will you?" Ignoring her jibes, we entered the restaurant and exchanged greetings with Michelle's fiancé. He was a flashy, handsome man, a stark contrast to Thomas, but he did look capable in his profession. "I'm Emily, Michelle's sister. It's nice to meet you."
"And I'm Thomas, Emily's husband. Nice to meet you."
As we exchanged greetings, Michelle's fiancé, Larry, also bowed his head and said,
"Nice to meet you too."
I tried my best to ignore my sister, who was beaming victoriously next to him. Just then, Thomas's phone rang.
"I'm sorry, this is important. I need to step outside for a moment."
Thomas left the room, and I felt nervous. Despite having dinner with our parents, Michelle, and her fiancé, my mind was elsewhere. Then, a flustered Thomas returned to the room and whispered something in my ear. "Really? Congratulations, Thomas! That's amazing!" I couldn't help but raise my voice. "What's the matter? Not at a time like this!" My mother asked, a surprised look on her face. "Thomas's novel won a major literary award, and it's going to be made into a movie."
"What? Is that true? Well done, Thomas."
"Yes, that's great, Thomas. It was worth it. All that support Emily has given you." Our parents were overjoyed.
"Congratulations, Thomas. I'm delighted to hear such wonderful news."
Larry also applauded and offered his congratulations.
"Let's drink to celebrate. I'm sorry, but I need to give some interviews about the award."
"All right, I guess that's about it for Thomas and Emily. Just as Mom was about to say this, something unthinkable happened. Michelle, who was sitting next to Larry, suddenly stood up and walked over to us, positioning herself between Thomas and me.
Hey, sis, what the?
Shut up, ugly.
Michelle's voice was icy.
Hey, Thomas, why don't we get married? I mean, I'm far more suited for a successful award-winning author like you than someone like Emily, right?
As she said this, she placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder and drew herself close to him. I felt like everything was crumbling down around me. Michelle always wants what I have, and once she's tired of it, she shoves it aside. She constantly looks down on Thomas and me, belittling us, yet because we are family, because she's my sister, I tolerated her. But no more. I felt a tension inside me snap. That's enough, Michelle. You've always been like this. I yelled, lunging at her, but she lost her footing and fell back awkwardly. Thomas, who had been leaning on Michelle, jumped back swiftly. Michelle, fallen in an ungraceful heap on the carpet, widened her eyes in surprise. I froze.
What? What are you doing?
That's what I should be asking. What were you thinking?
Thomas's voice was as cold as ice. He looked down at Michelle as if she were something dirty.
I mean, I was offering to marry you.
Even if I was the last man on earth, I'd say no. Emily is the only one for me for life.
What? What's so good about Emily? I'm prettier. My figure is better.
Emily is not only more beautiful on the outside, but also on the inside compared to you. Also, she's been by my side all this time. That's why I won these awards. Something you could never do.
Thomas came over to me and put his arm around my shoulders as he said this. I could feel my anger towards Michelle melting away. Warm tears streamed down my face.
What the hell? Even though I made all these advances, you rejected me.
Michelle's face turned bright red, her voice trembling. Michelle, what are you doing? Do you even realize what kind of occasion this is?
Isn't Larry supposed to be your fiancé?
Our parents, who had come back to their senses, quickly reprimanded her, looking as if she just woke up from a dream. Michelle ran over to Larry.
I'm sorry, Larry. I guess it has to be you after all.
Enough. Just stop talking.
Larry, who had been watching the whole time, said this as he straightened his tie.
Who would want to marry a woman who throws herself at another married man at a meet and greet? Let's call this engagement off, shall we? I'm sure you understand why.
Our parents turned pale. They could only nod in agreement.
Wait a minute. Even you, Larry. I've already told everyone that we're getting married. It will be a problem if you don't marry me.
My sister yelled, to which Larry, with a calm voice, responded,
I think it's about time to excuse myself. Congratulations once again, Thomas. Best wishes.
We could do nothing but bow our heads as Larry left the room.
Wait a minute, Larry! Larry! No!
Only the shrill sound of my sister's frantic cries echoed.
I am disgusted. Don't show your face for a while.
Our parents also left the restaurant, casting a contemptuous look at my sister.
Emily, let's go home.
I held Thomas's hand tighter as he reached for mine. Turning around, I saw my sister collapse in a daze. Fast forward a few months, after her engagement with Larry was broken off, my sister seemed depressed for a while, but is now eagerly searching for a new marriage partner. However, she only seems to be seeking high-profile partners, and men who seem to be astounded by her mercenary attitude. My sister, whose beauty has started to fade with age, is likely to have a hard time finding a marriage partner. As for us, Thomas, who was busy for a while, after winning the award, with the award ceremonies, interviews, and film releases, is now actively working on his next project. Thomas has always been kind to me, but he's now renowned as a loving husband, often sharing stories about me in his award interviews. Supporting my growing belly due to my pregnancy, I pledged to support Thomas